Hi there, my name is Scott Engel. Welcome to Below the Surface, the latest edition. This episode is for the weekend of April 5th and 6th, 2025, as we continue our Lenten sermon series at St. Andrew on the parables. And so I'm really happy to be here with you today. We come today to two of my favorite parables. The preachers this weekend will preach from one or both, depending on, sort of preacher's choice, I guess, is how we might think about it. But the parables in view this weekend are the rich man and Lazarus, and the laborers in the vineyard, the workers in the vineyard. And we're going to just go through them both, and I will try to help you maybe get something out of them you might not have before. So I've preached these many times, and often when I preach, I retell the story, okay? Trying to bring certain things out and trying to connect with the people in the congregation. I think what I want to do today is be a bit careful, and we'll actually read through these two parables, verse by verse, and really seeing what is there in the NIV translation of it, and see if that won't take us a little bit below the surface of these two very well-known parables. So if you would get your Bible and open it to Luke chapter 16, that's where you would find the story of the rich man and Lazarus, in a section of Luke which is talking a good deal about wealth and its, the dangers of it. A lot is said in the New Testament about wealth and the dangers of it, the way it can pull us away from being the disciples that Jesus would hope we would be. So, in any event, I think we're all set. Just making sure I got everything set up. As I told you, I'm the studio engineer here. So I've got sound and we're recording. I think we're good. So Luke chapter 16, verse 19. And we're just going to plunge right in. All right. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple. That's the color of royalty. It's a costly dye. So purple is always about wealth and royalty, power, that sort of thing. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen and lived in luxury every day. At his gate there was a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores, and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs came and licked Lazarus' sores. So just have the picture in your mind. There's this rich man who has everything, Lazarus who has nothing and is even below nothing. Dogs licking the sores, what agony he must have been in, Lazarus, and yet he languishes by the gate as this rich man goes in and out every day. I am sure I doubt he even consciously ignores Lazarus. I just think he probably doesn't even see him. That's how it can be so often that people who we see as the others, people who are in need, are just invisible to us. It's like they're made out of cellophane. I'm thinking of the song from the musical Chicago about Mr. Cellophane. Well, that was how it was. Verse 22. The time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. The phrase is Abraham's bosom. So now the beggar has been carried by the angels to the very place of comfort and peace. Not wealth, okay? Not royalty, comfort and peace. The time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and he was buried. Now in Hades, that's verse 23, in Hades, so I better explain what Hades is. Hades is the Greek underworld. It is where the dead people are. It's just where the dead people are. For most of Greek history to this point, there was no connotation of punishment. It was kind of a gray place, not a place that you would necessarily want to go, but it wasn't what we think of as hell. Okay, same way for the Jews. The Jews didn't call it Hades. They called it Sheol. It was the pit. It was where the dead are. A place that the Jews would be rescued from one day by God. Egyptians had the underworld as well. All the ancient cultures did, because for them, God is straight up. You and I live here, and the dead are beneath us. So, by the time in history that we come to Jesus, in Greek thought, there was beginning to be a sense that in Hades, there was a place of maybe punishment, maybe, well, really not a good place at all. And I think that's partly because within us we want justice to be done. And in Greek, as I recall, the name of this island of torment, as it were, in Greek was called, in Hades, was called Tantaros, something like that. Anyway, don't hold me to it. So in Hades, we're told in verse 23, where he, this is the rich man, was in torment. Torment. Okay. So now roles are reversed, right? Lazarus is resting in Abraham's bosom, and the rich man is in torment. It had been Lazarus who was in torment, not only covered in sores and starving to death, but with dogs licking his sores. So now it is the rich man who was in torment. And look back at the verse. The rich man looked up, and he saw Abraham far away. So they're sort of in the same place, but the rich man is in one corner, I guess. And so I think that the focus is on, the torment he is in now is the torment that Lazarus had experienced, because it's like a complete reversal. That's the key. This is not a parable about the afterlife, okay? This is a parable, first of all, about not allowing people to become cellophane to you, but to see those in need and be ready to do something. But there's another really, really big point that we're coming to in here, and it's quite clear, really. So let me go back to the beginning of verse 23. In Hades, where the rich man was in torment, he looked up and he saw Abraham far away, with Lazarus by his side. So he called to him, "Father Abraham, have pity on me, and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire." Oh, what, the rich man is suffering terribly, 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 and just a finger dipped in cool water might help him. I wonder how many times Lazarus felt that way in the course of day after day after day, in the torment that he lived in right outside the rich man's gate. Verse 25, but Abraham replied, "Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, while Lazarus received bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony." Role reversal. Complete and utter reversal. Key. "And besides all this," Abraham says, "between us and you there's a great chasm that has been set in place, so that those who want to go from here to where you are cannot, nor can anyone cross from there to here." So he's basically telling the rich man, you're stuck. You're there. The consequences of your choices have been turned back on your head, to paraphrase a verse from Ezekiel. So the rich man then yells out, "Then I beg you, Father, send Lazarus to my family. I have 5 brothers. Let him warn them, so that they will not also come to this place of torment. Abraham, go tell them, go tell my brothers what's happened to me, so that they will avoid this place. At least that can come out of this." And so now we come to what is perhaps the overriding point of the parable. I guess if I had to pick one, there are scholars that tell you that every parable has one point. And I think if I had to come up, not everybody agrees with that, but if I were to come up with one point in this parable, it would be what we have come to now. The earliest part of the story of the rich man Lazarus is a common story that circulated around the ancient Near East in various ways. But now we have this ending that Jesus has put on it. And he's put it on for a reason. So the rich man says, "Abraham, just go back and tell my brothers. Just tell my brothers, and they can avoid this." And Abraham said to him, "If they don't listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced even if someone rises from the dead." Boom. The end of Jesus' parable. So what is that final climactic moment about? Well, Abraham tells the rich man, they have Moses, they have the prophets, they know all of this. They know they're to take care of their neighbor. They know this. They've been told this. And besides, even if someone rose from the dead, they wouldn't be convinced of what awaited them, because they just don't want to. You see, that's it. So, of course, when we read this, you can't help but think of the times that Jesus says, someone could die and be dead 3 days and rise from the dead, and people still wouldn't listen. And that's been the case. I'm sometimes asked in my classes, well, why doesn't God just use some big super megaphone, right, and just blast it across the world and do these magnificent miracles everybody would see, and then everybody would believe? And I think the answer is nope. Nope, they wouldn't. They would turn it all into whatever they wanted it to be, some giant circus or something like that. It is because for most people, I'd venture to say, lack of faith in Jesus, turning away from Jesus, isn't really an intellectual problem that they can't deal with. It's because there are demands placed on them. See, the rich man would have had to change his life to help Lazarus and others. Remember the story of the rich young ruler who was told, Jesus, he's done everything. And Jesus says, okay, go and sell your possessions and follow me. And the rich young ruler can't do it. We talked about that maybe last week. So it is hard for us to really embrace God's way. And indeed, in the end, you have to throw yourself on God's grace, don't you? I do. I know that, as Paul says, I know that I do the things that I shouldn't do, and I know that I don't do things that I should do. And I'm grateful that it is by the grace of God that God has grabbed me, and I have been reconciled to God. But this parable is about, what Jesus often has to say. You have the law of Moses, you have the prophets, you have everything you need. You don't need somebody else showing up in a miraculous way right now. It's like Jesus when Nicodemus comes to see him in the middle of the night in John 3. And Nicodemus doesn't understand what Jesus is doing or how Jesus is talking about the Spirit blowing here and there and people being born a second time and all of that. And Jesus says, you're a teacher. You're a teacher. How can you not know these things? Jesus' view, if the Pharisees, the priests, the rest of them were really good shepherds, they would understand these things, but they're not, and they don't. So that is the often talked about parable of the rich man and Lazarus. It's sometimes brought to me as a parable about the afterlife. It's not about the afterlife. That's not the focus of it. It is about the reversal. It is about seeing those who are in need, in desperate need. It is about understanding that we have been given by God already everything that we need to come to faith in Christ. We don't need a circus or some giant miracles or something else to understand. So, in any event, you can find lots written about that particular parable because it captures people's imagination as it does mine. So that's the first one for this weekend. The second one is another one of my favorites, and it is found in the Gospel of Matthew and in the 20th chapter. I got to get to the right place here in my little iPad here. So this is so turn to Matthew chapter 20 verse 1. Chapter 20 verse 1. I'll give you a second to get there. Okay. So, this is a pretty simple one, really, but it's very challenging. But it's helpful if we read it closely, because it's easy to summarize. But it's probably, Jesus told it in a lengthy version, and I think and probably for a reason, because some of the little bits of it are important. So here's Jesus again. This is Jesus speaking, of course. He says, "For the kingdom of heaven," the kingdom of God, I talked about that a few weeks ago, "is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and put them to work in his vineyard." Now, a denarius is an ancient coin, and it basically was a day's wages. So that's what we're being told, because the value of a denarius was typically a day's wages. So we're being told that he offered these people a day's wage, whatever you think that might be, for laborers just going to go out in the field and, pick grapes or whatever needed to be done in the vineyard. He agreed to pay them all a denarius. It's a good and proper offer. And he's gone out and got them early in the morning. About 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing, and he told them, "You can go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." Now notice an amount is not stipulated. He just says to them, "I'll pay you whatever is right." Whatever is just is a way to think about it. I'll pay you whatever is right. So they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon and did the same thing. Come on, work. I'll pay you what's right. About 5 in the afternoon he went out and found still others standing around. Now by 5 in the afternoon the workday's basically done. It's time for the cool breezes to come in and, it's almost over. So about 5 in the afternoon he went out, and he found others still standing around, and he said to them, he asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day doing nothing?" And they said, "Because no one has hired us." And he said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." No promise of a denarius, no promise even to pay them. Notice there's no promise to even pay them. Not to pay them what is right, like he did with the earlier ones. Just you can go and work in my vineyard. Well, when evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first." So 5, 3, noon, 9 at the beginning of the day. All right. I'll give you one piece of maybe interesting context. This is a time when people would generally wanted their wages at the end of every day. So they didn't wait for a paycheck, twice a month or something like that. These people are living subsistence diets, barely hanging on. And so it was considered wrong if workers weren't paid their wages at the end of the day. So all of this is kind of right and proper, isn't it? So the workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came, and each received a denarius. So they show up at the end of the day when the work's basically done. The cool breezes are blowing. Martinis are being poured. And each receives a full day's wage, which was the amount promised to the people that he got at like sunrise. The first group. When those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. Of course they did. If the guys who got here at 5 o'clock got a denarius, well, we're going to get a lot more than that. I know what he said, but we're going to get a lot more than that. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble about the landowner. Well, you know what they're saying. Yeah, how often do I hear that these days? How often did I hear that from my kids? It's not fair. 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 Yeah, not fair. Their sense of fairness is offended by this. They said, "Those who were hired last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day." But the landowner answered, one of them, saying, "I'm not doing anything. I'm not being unfair to you, my friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Didn't you agree to come work for the day for a day's wage? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was here, who was hired last, the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous?" Envious. Envy is one of the 7 deadly sins, as they came to be called. Envy has kind of a specific meaning. It is feeling bitter when others have it better. One of the classic cinematic experience of envy is the movie Amadeus, Salieri's envy of Mozart. These early work, the ones who got there in the morning, they are envious. It offends their sense of fairness. But they did get what they were supposed to get. The fact that the landowner is being gracious or kind or generous to those who came later in the day shouldn't be any concern of those who were picked up in the morning. And then Jesus closes the parable with this famous verse, which appears in other contexts. So the last will be first, and the first will be last. Grace, which is what I think this parable is fundamentally about, is we say we like it. And I guess we all want grace to be poured out on us. We just don't like it very much when it's poured out on people who we think don't deserve it. The problem with that is that if you're getting something you deserve, it's not grace. Grace is undeserved favor, an undeserved gift. Unmerited favor is the old expression for it. That's what grace is. If you deserve it, it's not grace. If it's a pay or reward, it's not grace. Grace is unmerited favor. You don't deserve it. It's just given to you outright, a gift, just given to you. And that's what the landowner is doing. And so for me, I always fall back into the portrait of our salvation, our reconciliation with God. There are those like the people in the morning who have known God their whole lives. I can think of one woman at St. Andrew. We were talking about this one time, and she just said, "I've just always loved Jesus." Wow, how special! What a gift! Not my story, but it's her story. And if you encounter someone who seems to live it up and live in the lap of luxury and party and all that stuff that the world values so highly, and then comes to Jesus late in life, all we should do is to be grateful. Not saying something like, "Well, oh my gosh, that's not fair. Look at them. They're getting the same thing as this gal over here who loved Jesus since she can't even remember when she didn't love Jesus." That's not how it is. It's if we all got what we were due, if Jesus was fair with all of us, we would be doomed. Paul writes, we are all, for all of us, it is true that we fall short of God's standard. That our salvation is a gift. It is given to us in grace by God. None of us deserve it, and none of us can boast about it. To me, that's what this parable is about. Parables lend themselves to different interpretations, but every time I come to this, if I were to preach it tomorrow, that's what I would preach, because I think it's hard for us to hear that the cross is not about fairness. It is about God's grace poured onto all, early in their lives, later in their lives, after their death. What we should do is rejoice over every single person who becomes reconciled with God, regardless of when or regardless of the circumstances. Yep. We should all be workers who got picked up in the morning and rejoiced that, doesn't say there were any, but who would rejoice that the workers at 5 o'clock also got a denarius to take home to their families. So in any event, that's what I have to say today on the second parable. So I look forward to seeing you in worship this weekend. The preachers will all have a lot to say about these parables as we make our way through this series, and I hope that what I'm doing just maybe helps prepare you a little bit, so when the preacher takes his or her own direction with it, you'll feel a little more grounded. So in any event, I have a great weekend and a very superb next weekend. Enjoy the burgeoning spring. And with that, I'll say adios. Bye-bye.